Hey, it's Animal Collector here, and today's video we're going to be taking a look at a brief newspaper that I picked up a while ago. This is the Evening Standard, which was a London tabloid that ran basically forever, well over 100 years. And this particular issue is dated to January 20th, 1944, brought to us by John Jameson Whiskey and Seeger's Gin. That's how you know this is a quality publication. So most of the articles in here are actually in relation to the Second World War. So what we're going to do is we're going to be reading through a selection of some of these stories here. I cannot speak to the veracity of these, but they give you a nice snapshot to what people were thinking about and reading about at the time. I'm going to edit in a little bit of ambiance here as well, because I expect this to be a bit of a longer video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the news of January 20th, 1944. Leningrad sees the captured siege guns. First of the captured German siege guns, for 2 years the tormentors of Leningrad were being trailed through the city today, followed by German prisoners. There were scenes of rejoicing everywhere. Soviet reserves, states Duncan Hooper, Reuters correspondent, were almost mobbed by the crowds as they passed through to join General Govorov's troops, who have blasted a gap 25 miles wide southwest of the city. The Red Army continues to press forward on the three main sectors, south of Oranienbaum, below Polkovo, site of the noted observatory, and above and below the city of Novgorod, all but encircled. General Meretskov's forces on the Volkhov front have made a breach of more than 30 miles in the German line and crossed the frozen tip of Lake Ilmen. The Germans are throwing in all they have got in a bid to hold the Russians on new positions, but the Red Army are beating down the fierce resistance with massed artillery fire and quick rushes of infantry up to the pillboxes. Shores cleared. With the fall of Peterhof, former summer residence of the Tsars, the shores of the Gulf opposite the naval base of Kronstadt have been almost cleared of the German siege armies. Oranienbaum, Krasnoye Solowana Ropsha lie behind the Red Army as they press the Germans back towards Krasnogvardeysk, 22 miles below Leningrad. Henry Shapiro, British United Press correspondent, says that the Russian tank divisions, which smashed through the German defensive belt on the Gulf of Finland, have broken into open country and are now racing toward the railway, linking Leningrad with the Estonia town of Narva. The Germans are using a new phrase to describe the Red Army offensive. They call it an incessant attack. Strong reserves. A German military spokesman said that the Russians were bringing up strong reserves and indicating further violent attacks ahead. Soviet forces were attacking over the ice of the Volkhov River with the aim of taking the German garrison in Novgorod City in the rear. Hans Adolf Weber, a German war reporter, is quoted as saying that German salients on the northern flank, presumably in the Leningrad area, will be greatly threatened when the thaw gives way to freezing conditions. German admiral killed. Vice Admiral Kieseritzky, commander-in-chief of German naval forces in the Black Sea Fleet, was killed last November in a Soviet air raid on his headquarters, according to captured German sailors quoted by the Soviet news agency. 3-hour gun duel in Straits. An enemy convoy is believed to have been the target of our big guns on the south coast, which, between 5 and 8 o'clock today, fired about 80 rounds across the Dover Straits. Enemy batteries replied from the Boulogne area, and the fierce exchange shook towns in the Dover area. A convoy, it is thought, may have slipped out of Boulogne or Calais in the hope of reaching the North Sea. Coast reporters telephoned this morning it was one of the most continuous cross-channel bombardments for some time, and along the various parts of the southeast coast, the reports of enemy shells were heard. At times, they came over in salvos of 4, some in pairs, and some singly. Sea lit up. The weather had improved over the straits, the moon having broken through the clouds, but the other side of the channel was still shut out by mist and cloud. The brilliant flashes of our guns lit up sea and land over a wide area. After our guns had ceased firing, the Germans still sent over an occasional shell, the last 45 minutes after our guns were silent. The German news agency, quoted by Reuters, gave this report of this morning's channel shellings. Long-range naval guns on the channel shelled the important military targets in Dover, Folkestone, Deal, and Ramsgate between 5:12 and 7:15 this morning. Enemy shore batteries replied. Saving bomber was just another job. During a U.S. heavy bomber mission over Germany, Lieutenant Robert Deerdorf of Berkeley, California, a Fortress bombardier, saved his aircraft and crew by hanging from the open bomb bay to defuse 36 incendiary bombs which failed to release. His comment on reaching base was, "It was nothing but another job." Killed when in sight of safety. Lieutenant J.W. Tidy, old Rutleasian rugby forward, walked 400 miles from a prisoner's camp in northern Italy to a point from which he could see the British lines. There, he stepped on a mine and was killed. 2 shot down over Norway. In the course of an offensive patrol over Norway yesterday, RAF Mosquitoes destroyed 2 enemy aircraft without loss, says an Air Ministry communique today. Dimitrov planning revolt in Bulgaria. Dimitrov, secretary of the dissolved Comintern, the man who taunted Goering in the Reichstag trial, has been in Bulgaria organizing resistance, according to reports from Ankara, says Reuters. He is 62 and a Bulgarian. He issued as secretary last May the decree dissolving the Communist Internationale. Dimitrov has been in Russia for some years, as secretary of the Comintern, and in 1937 was elected a deputy to the Soviet parliament. In the past 30 years, the fiery Bulgarian has had a life of many escapes, and twice he has been rescued from prison by the intervention of the Soviet government. He was one of the accused in the Reichstag trial, and was denied the right to select his own counsel. Dimitrov chose to defend himself, and when Goering spoke in court, he was cross-examined by Dimitrov. So searching were Dimitrov's questions that Goering lost his temper and exclaimed, "I did not come here for you to question me like a judge, or for you to fling reproaches at me. You are a scoundrel who should be hanged." Fifth threat to Gaeta. Attack in strength east of the town. Gaeta, first big town beyond the Garigliano, is now threatened by British forces which have crossed the river. Rome Radio today says the Fifth Army are launching a series of attacks in strength east of Gaeta. British United Press's correspondent Chris Cunningham says British troops are fanning out in an effort to link up the 3 bridgeheads they have won. They have already captured important heights beyond the river after smashing the first determined German counterattacks. Argento, a few hundred yards inland from the mouth of the Carigliano, is the most western of the British bridgeheads, according to reports reaching Allied headquarters. In full swing. Karl Pregner, military correspondent of the German news agency, says Reuters claims that the Allied forces have been brought to a standstill between the beaches and the Appian Way. The Allies have dug themselves in after sustaining considerable casualties, he says. General Clark's forces operating on the Garigliano were involved in bloody battles east and northeast of Minturno on the fringes of the coastal mountains. The heaviest attacks are being directed against our positions on the slopes of the Orunai Mountains, the announcer said. The battle is in full swing, and it is yet too early to forecast what its outcome will be. Cassino pressure. Pressure is being kept up around Cassino and along the Rapido River further north. This is preventing the Germans from massing reinforcements from the interior to meet the serious Allied threat on the lower Garigliano. A devastating raid on Omis. The Hungarian news agency today quoted an official announcement from Zagreb that Allied aircraft carried out a devastating raid on Omis, 15 miles south of Split on the Yugoslav coast, on Tuesday, says Reuters. Enemy aircraft carried out devastating raids on Zadar and Sebenik on Sunday, the agency added. Details of these raids have not been received. Sebenik was named as a raid target on Tuesday in the Allied headquarters communique. RAF paralyzed Hitler's Aegean supply routes. Powerful blows by Allied naval and air forces are having a paralyzing effect on Hitler's supply routes to his anti-invasion island based in the Aegean and Ionian seas. The Germans have now been forced to cut down the size of their supply convoys because of the punishment exacted by these Allied forces, says Dennis Martin, Reuters special correspondent from Cairo. This is revealed in an RAF statement published in the Middle East. By September 1943, 165 ships, totaling about 53,580 tons, had been sunk, reported the statement. German strategy in the eastern Mediterranean is modeled on a policy of strong forward protection for the Grecian and Balkan flanks, by using the strategically placed islands of Crete, Scarpanto, and Rhodes. Strong enemy garrisons are maintained in these islands. In rear support of these troops are units of the German Air Force, based mainly on a group of airfields in the Athens area and Crete. The main Allied air strategy in the Balkans, Aegean, and Ionian seas is directed not so much against any individual target, or targets, but against enemy lines of communication, which supply the ring of island defenses and other strategic points of that theater. As the Germans encounter increasing difficulties among the islands, reports reaching the Middle East today state that heavily reinforced German forces are strengthening their drive against Yugoslav partisans in western Bosnia and Croatia. Women fighter pilots. American women, who will play a progressively greater part in the nation's aerial war effort, will make excellent fighter pilots. Major Alexander P. D. Seversky told an audience of 2,000 Stevens College women at Columbia, Missouri, according to Associated Press. Men deteriorate under routine, the noted author and lecturer said. Women follow rules, work more individually, and with more tenacity, and stick longer to their jobs. The air triumph. Many startling comparisons have been drawn between Britain's position in 1940 and her position today. The full story, with all its exciting details, cannot be told until after the war. However, the figures given in the House of Lords yesterday show that a notable and amazing place the British aircraft industry will occupy in that famous record of record-breaking. At the beginning of the war, Germany had a 4-to-1 air superiority over us. She had 4,320 operational aircraft. British production in the 4 months before the formation of Mr. Churchill's government reached the total of 2,700 operational machines. In the next 4 months, the figure rose to 6,400. Since that day, the aircraft industry has continued its progress with sustained triumph. These facts give us confidence that British industry will be fully able to meet the forthcoming requirements of civil aviation. But there is another and more immediate deduction which can be derived from these figures. They show that our armies, our pilots, and all those who will engage in the launching of the Second Front will be backed by a rich flow of the most essential weapons. Sometimes we have been inclined to take for granted the operations which will be required to make the great assault successful. And yet, by any reckoning, it is a huge military enterprise, calling for the most brilliant feats of organization and ceaseless support from all those engaged on the home front in producing the instruments of victory. We should live every moment of our lives now in the consciousness that we are on the eve of the greatest military adventure ever undertaken from these islands. The exact course of events which will follow the grand attack depends on a number of intangible and unknowable factors. What is the precise state of German morale? How much have they been able, amidst all their other embarrassments, to reshape their defenses and make ready their defending forces? These and other questions cannot be precisely answered. We must be ready for anything. Ready to surmount disappointments, ready with new devices to meet new contingencies, ready to maintain the smashing assault with all the power of our productive machine. To fulfill the task, our armies and our people will need all the inspiration they can command. They derive it partly from the knowledge of our tremendous and still growing strength, especially in the air, where the Germans boasted they were unconquerable, and indeed unchallengeable. They derive it also from the knowledge of the high cause to which they are dedicated. Our pledge is to liberate the continent, and we shall do it best and most speedily if we all realize the momentous nature of the undertaking and rise to the peak of our abilities in every field in order to discharge it. Vichy government official killed. Today's reports of anti-German activities in France reported the death of a government official, a magistrate, and 2 soldiers. M. Pierre Ancel, Vichy Ministry of Finance official, was assassinated in Lyons, says Vichy Radio, which also reported the president of the Court of Appeal of Aix-en-Provence was shot dead while on his way home from the Palais de Justice. Brazzaville Radio, reporting the killing of the 2 German soldiers in Lyons, said that as a reprisal, all entertainments have been closed and an 8 p.m. curfew imposed. It added, in Paris, numerous arrests and checkups on identity cards have been carried out, and among the arrested are 60 police officials. Arrested. German police have taken measures against some French industrialists in the Champagne district. According to the collaborationist newspaper, Le Gerbe, numerous partisans have been arrested in the Arras area. French women are taking an increasingly active role in the resistance movement, according to Paris reports quoted by the Tribune de Genevieve, says Reuters. The police find it much harder to watch them than men, as they can gather in queues and find 1,000 other ways of meeting for patriotic purposes, the newspaper said. In prison, many French women are already in German custody, and some have probably already paid for their patriotism with their lives. In many towns, it is believed that all men will be arrested in the event of an Anglo-American invasion, and that the women will rise instead. All the firemen of Paris were involved in a semi-strike, because their 45 days annual leave had been cut down to 15, says Reuters. They refused to turn out for any other job than the actual putting out of fires. Their argument was either we are soldiers, in that case we demand 45 days leave, or we are civil servants and we demand a policeman's pay, 6 times higher than their own. During the negotiations, German sappers had to do all the fire brigade's dirty work. Finally, the firemen accepted a compromise of 24 days leave, and the strike ended. Big air battle over Rabaul. Allies shoot down 18 planes, hit 8 ships. More than 100 Allied airplanes and a powerful daylight blow against Japanese shipping in the Great Rabaul anchorage have sunk or badly damaged 8 much-needed enemy supply ships, says Reuters. Diving through the mass fire of destroyers, flak ships, and shore batteries, the Allied dive bombers, torpedo airplanes, and fighters sank 3 merchantmen. 2 more were left burning and in a sinking condition, and 3 others badly damaged. One of the biggest air battles of the Southwest Pacific was fought during the attack. For an unusually aggressive attempt to beat off the Allied raiders, the Japanese sent up more than 100 fighters. The Japanese lost 18 fighters with another 15 probables for the loss of 12 Allied airplanes, mostly fighters. Driven off. On the western tip of New Britain, a Japanese counterattack on the fortified Hill 660, captured by U.S. troops during the week, and was driven off. Allied patrols south of the hill and beyond the airfield after the attack failed to contact the Japanese. At Arawi, on the south coast of New Britain, there has been no change in the ground position since the advance by American Indian jungle fighters reported yesterday. 2 small Japanese air raids on Allied positions were quite ineffectual. American troops have advanced from their bridgehead in the Empress Augusta Bay area of the Solomons Island of Bougainville. Under cover of supporting fire from artillery, they have forced a crossing of the Torokina River and occupy positions near East Lagoon. At Sio, in New Guinea, southerly end of the narrow coastal strip where a Japanese force is boxed in, Australians are consolidating their positions. Peace rumor was Nazi trick. The suggestion that Germany had tried to open separate peace negotiations with both Russia and Britain had failed and then spread the séparate talk story to both countries is made by the Washington correspondent of the New York Times today, quoted by British United Press. This is the opinion of diplomatic circles in Washington, he says, adding that the story is seemingly credible. Such reports succeed in getting into British and American newspapers, and this time succeeded in getting into Pravda because the Soviet government was angered by the public offers of mediation in the Polish boundary dispute by Britain and the United States. It is believed that now Russia has expressed her resentment, and in a manner even more effective than intended, relations between the big three will return to normal. The New York Times, quoted by Reuters, also discussed the accusation that the present Polish government in London is reactionary, unrepresentative, and lacking in authority, saying it is probably as close to being representative of Poland as it is possible for a government in exile to be under wartime conditions. Signals aided Jap attacks. Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt, in a 600-page final report on the evacuation of persons of Japanese ancestry from the west coast of America, said shore signals aided Japanese attacks early in the war. He cited 3 specific cases in which he said attacks by airplanes or submarines were aimed at spots where there were no defenses, and added that with the cessation of signaling, there has been a reduction in the number of attacks on ships sailing from the west coast. Reuters. Police commandos in Denmark. 2 police commandos are to be formed in Copenhagen, according to British United Press. Each will consist of a German field policeman, a regular German policeman, and 2 regular Danish policemen, and their main task will apparently be the handling of clashes between Danes and Germans. A denial that Germany ever intended to take over the Danish police has been given by Dr. Werner Best, the German minister in Denmark. 500 miles without rudder. Bombed and set on fire by enemy airplanes, the British merchant ship Port Fairy steamed 500 miles to port with her rudder useless. As the fire was still spreading after 5 hours and encircling the ammunition magazine on the lower deck, the chief officer, Mr. A.J. Neal of Postle Park, Glasgow, was lowered over the side on a rope's end. He climbed through the hole made by the bomb and, surrounded by flames and smoke and standing on a red-hot deck, played a hose on the fire. He was relieved by 5 others of the crew, and eventually they got the fire under control. Captain J.G. Lewis of Wolverhampton, steering by the engines, made good speed towards land. The ship rescued 7 airmen from a Catalina flying boat who had been adrift in their dinghies for 4 days and who had existed on 1 orange. Captain Lewis recently presented a ship's bell to a Wolverhampton school where one of his daughters is a pupil. The bell was found floating in the Atlantic on the wheelhouse of one of Captain Lewis's ships, which had been sunk by enemy action. Canadian destroyer commissioned here. Mr. Angus MacDonald, Canadian Navy Minister, announced the commissioning at Portsmouth of the Canadian destroyer Chaudière, formerly HMS Hero. She was the first Canadian ship commissioned at an English naval base. Exchange. I hope you've enjoyed this reading of the Evening Standard, January 20th, 1944.